let's say you're now working from home remotely on your personal laptop. You're no longer on a company laptop that probably has an image that's strictly set by your IT or InfoSec team with antivirus technology, firewall technology. So right away now the actual physical device you're on is vulnerable. Also, you're connecting to your normal home router. Netgear, for example, is the most popular, arguably, router used in the United States. They had a pretty large vulnerability they're scrambling to patch a few weeks ago.
With so many Americans working at home during the CCP virus or coronavirus pandemic, how has our data and personal information become much more vulnerable to cyber attack? How has the coronavirus pandemic created an opportunity for bad players, like the Chinese regime, to steal data from major corporations in the West? What steps can companies and individuals take to fend off these attacks? And how is the Chinese Communist Party spreading false propaganda about the virus as part of its information warfare campaign? In this episode, we sit down with Greg Barbaccia, a former intelligence sergeant in the US Army and former head of Palantir Technologies' internal threat intelligence team. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek. Greg Barbaccia, so great to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you for having me.
So Greg, you are, let's call you an expert in counterintelligence. And, in the past few years, we've been learning a lot about the great extent of the cyber attacks that have been coming out of communist China. You have a very interesting perspective on this as this coronavirus situation is hitting. All these people are working from home. When we talked offline, you described to me a pretty scary situation. Tell me about what you're seeing.
Sure, thanks, Jan. So basically what's going on is we have all these people who are working from home, and now what we call the cyber attack surface is much wider. Previously, you're in an office on your office endpoints that are provided. They're generally secured behind a virtual private network and various types of firewall technology, both software and hardware appliances. What we're seeing now is people are working from home, and now the security of the information passing back to their companies is only as secure as the weakest link in their personal network infrastructure.
So in even more layman's terms, tell me, what does that mean exactly? What are the implications?
The implications are that, let's say you're now working from home remotely on your personal laptop. You're no longer on a company laptop that probably has an image that's strictly set by your IT or InfoSec team with antivirus technology, firewall technology. So right away now the actual physical device you're on is vulnerable. Also, you're connecting to your normal home router. Netgear, for example, is the most popular, arguably, router used in the United States. They had a pretty large vulnerability they're scrambling to patch a few weeks ago. So now you're introducing how vulnerable your wireless router is. Then you've got modems, and then it's who's using what type of technology to get to the big internet. Am I doing a hotspot off my phone? What type of phone is it? What type of service provider am I using? There's just so many more ways for what is called a man-in-the-middle attack to occur, or people just to become victims of their own poor cybersecurity hygiene.
It seems like, as everyone is hunkering down and there is a lot less physical access for the people that are trying to do this, espionage work, which again, we've been seeing, a lot more of. It's become a lot more apparent to Americans and frankly around the world what's been happening. It strikes me that this is actually, you could imagine them trying to use this opportunity.
Absolutely. This presents an exciting opportunity for an adversary to collect a ton of intelligence on the employees of a company they're targeting. Specifically, think of a clear defense contractor that's working on classified contracts with the US government. Previously, the target has to be the technical infrastructure of the office building. I have one place to attack. Now, let's say your email server is compromised at the corporate level through any various means. Now, everyone is sending emails from their home networks. When you send an email, the header has certain metadata associated with it. Header information that includes the originating IP of where that email came from. When you're in the office, Usually everybody's exiting on the same router internet connection, so everybody's getting the same exit IP address, especially if you're behind a virtual private network. Now at home, if you're able to collect the metadata based off company communications, and this could be things, Slack is super popular, you will be able to map the IP addresses of all the employees of that company. And with different levels of granularity, you could get very close to geolocating those employees. From there, you could plan an entire operation to use human intelligence and other attack methods.
So do you think this is happening right now?
I would be surprised if the MSS in China is not thinking about this or would miss an opportunity to this large of a scale.
It seems like the Chinese Communist Party isn't really missing any opportunities. There's a ton of evidence that the virus originated in China, that it was that Chinese mismanagement and censorship and disinformation that promulgated, that allowed it to spread to the extent that it has. At the same time, the Chinese Communist Party is saying that it's got everything under control, and in fact, it's coming to the salvation of the world, so to speak. What do you make of this?
It's classic disinformation. They're doing anything they can to use any opportunity to make the United States look bad, such as saying this was a biological warfare attack by the U.S. Army, which is ludicrous. They're using any opportunity to make them look good, the goodwill of them providing information now, way too late, or medical supplies and the manufacturing of PPE.
So, you do have a little bit of experience of working in intelligence in these types of, broadly speaking, crisis situations. What exactly did you do?
Sure. Well, I come from a tactical military background. I was an intelligence sergeant, active duty in the Army for 5 years, with deployments to Mosul and Bagram, Afghanistan. After that, I worked in the intelligence community doing strategic level intelligence in DC, focusing on counter-IED activity for our troops overseas. And then for the last 10 years, I've been at a clear defense contractor that was making very exciting technology that's in use in the battlefield for the U.S. intelligence community and U.S. and coalition military partners. So I was in charge of protecting the Chinese government from using either overt or clandestine means to purloin that technology and understand our new capabilities.
Okay, so I can see you're speaking with quite a bit of authority about what we could be expecting from the Ministry of State Security, as you said, the MSS. What can these folks that are working from home and would be concerned, one, do themselves, and two, what should companies be doing to help basically not allow one of these mass collection scenarios to manifest?
Sure. So your personal cybersecurity hygiene is very, very important. You need to understand the type of devices you're running on. Whether you're on whatever endpoint, OS, Windows, or Mac, you need to make sure it's updated regularly with all the security patching. You need to make sure your router and your modem have the updated security patching and all the latest firmware. And then you just need to be smart. You need to not be going to suspect websites, things that are coming from China. You need to be smart about all the stuff we hear about phishing. What am I clicking on when does it make sense that this company is asking for my login information? And is this website legitimate? You want to be using SSL, the difference between HTTP and HTTPS. And the biggest vulnerability I see is just people have simple passwords. They're reusing passwords on a number of sites. And breaches are so ubiquitous that this is such a rich trove of information for an adversary to build a picture about you. It's called open source intelligence.
So you're basically saying the best thing you could do is change your password, especially into these sensitive data sets that you have access to, or whatever platforms you have access to, right away with a more complex password.
You should be using a password manager. You should not know any of your passwords, no matter how much duress you're under. There's commercial solutions available. They automatically populate your passwords. I'm a fan of using obfuscated usernames too. The problem is if I'm using greg@aol.com with an easy password that leaks to the dark web, now what a lot of people do is they're reusing those passwords. So an adversary will go try all the normal other social media accounts to see if I'm using that same password. And also, I'm using my name in the username, which identifies me. You're usually better off using random numbers in my experience, or letters.
So what about in a corporate situation? What should companies be doing to kind of secure against this increased threat of people working at home?
Companies must ensure they and implement a virtual private network, which means you cannot get to corporate resources from big internet. So, and you have to tunnel in through the corporate internet connection to even get to the resources. So I can't go to the library and log on to any public computer and just get to my sensitive corporate resources. Things like email are a little different through technologies like O365, for example. But if you want to get to a company's internal data, you should have to credential in through a virtual private network, and there should be 2 or 3-factor authentication. First factor is a password that you know. The second factor being a code that goes to your device, some sort of authentication app. And then what we're seeing a lot now is something I use in my personal life, third factor authentication, which is a physical token. So even if you were to get my password and my 2-factor authentication device, you still need a physical token to log into accounts.
What's a physical token?
A physical token is, usually you see them in one of 2 ways. Google Titan has technology, YubiKey is a popular one, and it's usually a USB device you plug directly into your computer or an old serial bus. And what we're also seeing now from mobile devices and Bluetooth computers is a Bluetooth dongle. Let's say you leave it on your keychain and you could push the button for the authentication.
That's fantastic to hear. It might be tough for some of us to do it personally, but I think in a corporate setting, this would make a ton of sense.
Biometrics are popular now too. Some Mac hardware endpoints come with fingerprint readers. You'll see that you need to scan to unlock the device as well, which I'm a big fan of.
Now, wait, are you saying that people are unlocking these things remotely?
It's certainly possible. The thing with physical access to the device, when an adversary gets physical access to the device, it's usually all bets are off, especially when you're dealing with an adversary like that is as sophisticated as China. They have a tremendous amount of technological capability. It's also no secret that when they get access to a device, they take the contents, even if the contents are encrypted, because they understand that while they may not be able to decrypt and read the contents now, they know in a few years technology will probably catch up and they'll be able to.
Why don't you give me an overview? I mean, you have a sense of this directly, and of course, let's talk about things that you know that are unclassified, obviously, but what is the level of sophistication that we're talking about here on the Communist Party side?
I think CPP's technical, what we call signals intelligence capability is world-class, and I think it's the public opinion of most intelligence professionals that they're a near peer to the United States in that regard.
So what industries would you say are most at risk here?
Certainly high-tech and national defense. We're talking things like AI, machine learning, robotics, people who are building large platforms, the giant government industry around the Beltway generally.
Which industries are the most working from home right now, from what you know?
From my experience, it would be the high-tech industries that are building platforms that the giant defense platforms work off of. There's certain industries when you're building physical infrastructure for the government, you have to do that from a factory. Luckily, other very susceptible industries are highly regulated. Things like finance, things like healthcare, they are simply not permitted to work from home. So there's a slight less risk on those industries, which is a good thing.
Well, that's okay. So that's extremely interesting. So you're telling me that the people working in healthcare and so forth, they're actually going into the office because they're an essential industry?
They're not only that they are essential in industry, that they are covered by very, very heavy regulations. When they're dealing with financial transaction information, trading, things like that, when you're dealing with public health information, there's regulations around exactly what systems are allowed to hold and process that data. So you simply are unable to open a personal laptop in a lot of these instances.
So you're not worried about the fact that it's exactly these industries that, because of this specific crisis situation, that are now more vulnerable because maybe people won't be at the office? That's not going to be an issue?
Everybody's more vulnerable. I think they're slightly less susceptible to being taken advantage of here. But the flip side of that, if they were to be exposed, the risk to the economy would be far greater.
Now, so a lot of folks that might be watching this show, they might not be terribly technically inclined, right? But they might still be concerned because they're suddenly working from home and they haven't, had the ability to, get this kind of infrastructure developed. Their companies haven't provided it. What can they actually do themselves? What can someone that isn't technically inclined do to protect themselves aside from the passwords?
Sure. So another thing is what comes along with telecommuting and working from home. The need, like we are right now, to have virtual teleconferences. And what that mandates is the use of these microphones and cameras, either external or embedded in your machines. So you have to be very smart about these. There are tons of historical precedent where these have been attacked and activated by adversaries or simply criminals. So what you can do is make sure you're doing simple things like when it's off, when it's on. You're physically blocking the aperture device of the camera so it can't be spied on remotely. And another really important thing is I see where a lot of people simply never turn their machines off nowadays. Hopefully they lock it, which you should all be doing by muscle memory when you leave your machine. Just simply lock the operating system. But also when you're not using the machine, shut it down completely. That way it has no active connection to the internet. And this is different than putting it to sleep because there's issues with memory being in RAM or not. Just simply shut it down completely. And what you're doing is you're minimizing the threat surface. You're making the amount of vectors available for an adversary to target far smaller.
So it's not just our computers and our smartphones that are actually connected to the internet. So, we have our Echoes, we have our Google Homes. What about those?
There's absolutely a threat there, Jan. Well, what this is called is the Internet of Things. There are over 1 billion internet-connected devices right now. Think of things like your smart TV, the aforementioned virtual assistants, Siri on your phone, smartwatches, your pedometer that's sending things to the cloud, a heart, things you wear on your wrist that monitor your heartbeat. These are all susceptible to tracking by a highly technically sophisticated adversary. You will really be surprised how many things, if you truly take your time and walk around your house, are connected to the internet. Things like coffee makers nowadays, refrigerators, think of Nest cameras, think of smart home thermostats. There's simply so many things that are connected to your network right now. It's really shocking.
Should people be taking any further precautions, or what possible precautions could they take for these types of devices?
Yeah, the precautions would be make sure you understand what information is getting sent and make sure you understand the privacy settings of your device. There's a couple layers to protecting yourself here. One is understanding what information is broadcasting. The second one is how do you obfuscate your identity with that information? So earlier I mentioned using usernames for accounts that aren't your real name, can't be traced to you, and are unique. That way, it's harder for an adversary to do what my job was as an all-source analyst. Take all these different pieces of intelligence and try to piece them together to make a holistic view of my target audience.
There is a lot less availability to do espionage the more conventional way at the moment. And China, or the Chinese Communist Party, is probably going to want to get that intelligence in other ways. And the way they're going to do it is through cyber espionage, increased cyber espionage. Is there any evidence of this happening right now at a greater scale?
I have not seen evidence that's been released to the public, but you would have to assume it is happening. Some people say that the MSS has bigger things to worry about, but they are laser focused on espionage against the West, primarily against the United States. So they don't care what kind of pandemic's happening. They're just worried about where their information is coming from. So a couple of things we're seeing affected right now. The 1,000 Talent Program you're familiar with, this transfer of technology from the United States to China. They're doing this generally through human co-optees, Chinese nationals who are coming here and are usually unwittingly getting involved, or they have some sort of coercion against them to send intellectual property and high-tech research and development back to the mainland. The problem is now it's harder, and with travel restrictions, they're losing the amount of human bodies they have in the United States to directly collect intelligence and send it back. So they have to mitigate that. They cannot allow for a drop in their intelligence collection. So what you lose in human intelligence capabilities, you have to make up for either in trying to co-opt non-Chinese national sources of human intelligence, or more likely in this more rich environment, targeting the technological vulnerabilities that exist to make up for that loss of human intelligence.
What would be your prediction? Let's assume this, this situation lasts another week or another few weeks or possibly longer. What is your expectation? Are these attacks just going to start increasing? I mean, what's going to happen?
Yeah, so that calculus has changed since the pandemic continues to proliferate. So it would be my medium confidence assessment that this is impacting Chinese human intelligence espionage operations in the United States. They're going to have to focus much more heavily on technological and signals intelligence collection. And what that is going to mean is they are going to have a gap in about 6 months to a year of how much collection they could do against the United States. And even more importantly than purely the amount of intelligence collected, they're losing their way to coerce their co-optees into working for them. So this pandemic has shown a few things that are very bad for how they influence their population. One, it's showing economic fragility in China, which they do not like getting out. And more importantly, it's showing that with these talent programs, they say they're investing in you, they're paying you to bring this good information you're learning. But now with the experience and the story of the whistleblowers in Wuhan, what you're really seeing is the party is only interested in supporting science and facts that support their agenda and their propaganda. Once something doesn't take the party line, they're very literally besmirching people, and they're literally letting people die when they don't stay in step with the propaganda. That is very bad for the recruitment of people in the future.
Oh, that's a very interesting perspective. I hadn't considered that before. How is this intelligence gathering? I think this is relevant. How is the intelligence gathering that the Chinese Communist Party does different from the intelligence gathering in the West in terms of methodology? Could you speak to that a bit?
Absolutely. The Chinese intelligence infrastructure does so well because everybody in the country is a co-optee, whether they're witting or unwitting, and they just exert so much control over the population. And with the amount of surveillance and the amount of data they collect, they know everything about everybody. So they have so much of a capability to exert control and influence over their population. In the United States, it's just not done that way. We use our own intelligence services. We partner with partner and coalition intelligence services. We do not co-opt United States innocent citizens who are in foreign countries as a matter of doctrine. It's just not how the United States operates.
There's also this element, I understand, of, basically, you mentioned this earlier, that if they gain access to some data, even if it's encrypted, they'll take it because maybe they'll be able to decrypt it later on. It'll go sit somewhere, or the AIs will start working on it, I suppose, or something like that. At the same time, it strikes me there's a similar sort of approach to just basically taking any intelligence. Sometimes it's just, casual things that no one would think of as being important or classified, but then kind of amalgamate them in the way that you described you would do, collecting all these different pieces of information to paint a broader picture on someone or a situation. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Open source intelligence, which is defined by collecting information that is not secured, otherwise secured, that you don't have to intercept or crack, to use layman's terms. That is the single largest producer of intelligence right now. That is more than technical capabilities at the national level. And it's all about, yes, putting these pieces together. That you used one password that is unique to you. You think it's unique, something you made. You use it in one place, it leaked. Now I'm searching for anywhere that password has ever leaked before. Then maybe I'm going to get the IP address that is associated with that breach that the password was found in. Now I'm piecing all these things together. Social media and Facebook is just the best thing to happen to people who are doing counterintelligence targeting, maybe ever.
And so, and just to be clear, what you're describing, that's the US intelligence collection, Chinese, or both?
Both. And it's done in the civilian sector, especially in law enforcement.
So Greg, let's switch gears here a little bit and tell me a little more about what you're seeing on the information warfare side of all of this. What is the CCP, the Communist Party of China, doing now?
They're doing their general propaganda machine. While this pandemic is terrible for them as well, it also gives them a great piece of information here and a great narrative to develop. This narrative that this is a capability that was deployed by the United States military or the United States intelligence community. Had it not been for this specific epidemic to point to, they would have to be making things up. It's interesting to watch. This is one of their core doctrines of this. How do I make something good? They're making, lemonade out of lemons here. This is something terrible that's happening in our country, but how can we use this to exert further information control on our population and demonize the West?
The Chinese Communist Party told the WHO mid-January that there was no human-to-human transmission. The WHO published that as fact, and frankly, I think misled a heck of a lot of response to this in probably most Western countries. What do you make of that?
I think it shows a very troubling influence of China to the WHO that is coming to the forefront right now, and that's the opinion of many people, some previous guests of your show as well. And basically, it's being used to make the United States response look bad and to sow discord among the population. And frankly, it's working.
But so, any final words?
Yes, we are our own worst enemies in these situations. You simply need to be smart. You need to make sure you know what type of devices, what the vulnerabilities are out there. Just get online, look at cybersecurity best practices, and you don't want to be the weakest link for your company.
Do you have a website or something you would recommend that would help people help themselves become more secure, or a checklist they could follow or something like that?
Sure. I've actually have a blog. It's called Intelligence, etc., intel-etc.com, and you'll find my cybersecurity hygiene best practices on there.
Oh, fantastic. And it just struck me, we a lot of us are actually home with less to do than we typically have. So what a great opportunity to take advantage of that. Greg, it's such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Jan.